Hey, what's up, comrades? Hope you're all doing well. It's time to watch Wizards. But first, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Yep. So, Wizards is a Ronald Baskins thing, joint. He is kind of like opposite Walt Disney. I think he worked for the Walt Disney. But he started his own kind of like media company before like Illumination or DreamWorks or anything like that was competing with Disney for like market share. And a lot of his older stuff is pretty dark. So Wizards is from like 1979, and it's pretty intense. So it's animated, but it's very like there's a lot of still shots, like drawings with like voiceover, and then there's animation, but it's old, like clearly old. It's smooth, but it's a lot darker. Like he'll use very like I would say unsubtle imagery. Like the main evil bad guy, the main evil wizard, literally like has a throne on a giant swastika. So not subtle at all. And essentially, this is just a story about light versus dark, right? The good versus evil. So the wizards, the story goes, we humans killed themselves off with nuclear war, and then for thousands of years, people were mutated, and there was like more mutations, and people became like goblins and looking things and whatnot. But then there was like good spots, and in the good spots, the progenitors of the human race, which were like the elves, the dwarfs, fairies, and the like, they also were born. And then time went by, and eventually, like the queen of the fairies, one day they were like having a festival, and she like got sick, or she got like concerned and ran up to her room, and then other fairies were like something's going on, so they also ran up to their room, and she had born twins, Avatar and Dark Wolf. And yep, so Avatar is pure, and people are attracted to him, and his magic is light and wholesome, and they're both like super powerful wizards. And the Dark Wolf looks like Gollum, and people hate, he's like people are drawn away from him and whatnot, and they immediately like Dark Wolf was like fuck you mom and like left and never came back. And then when she died, eventually like thousands of years later or whatever, he like celebrated and was like, now is the time for my rule. And then he's tried like battling Avatar and the goods, but then he was like driven off. And hid out in Scorch for like thousands of years, like 3,000 years, I think is what they say. Meanwhile, Avatar is good. He taught magic, and he protected people, and kind of like reclaimed the land, and all this good stuff. And so for thousands of years, they just kind of like exist. And then eventually, Scorch is like, all right, now it's the time. And he sends out 3 assassins. There's Necron, like 1999, I think is what it is. And then a couple of their goblin guys. And we get some shots of them going and like murdering like a wizard and some political leaders from like the free states or like the good portions of the world. And then Necron, and then we meet these 2 like elves who are riding these like crazy looking like almost like fat chocobo but featherless creatures. And they're like, oh, there's an assassin being sent to kill like the president of the free states. We got to go warn Avatar. And so they head out, but then Necron's there too, and he kills one of them, and then the other guy like fights him off a cliff and then keeps heading out. Then we finally get introduced to Avatar, who's like an old man who likes to smoke stogies. Oh, also, this show is not afraid of like fan service. Like immediately when Necron and the other assassins are leaving like Scorch, they run into like some boobalicious like prostitutes. They're ugly, but they're like, they got giant knockers. And then when we meet Avatar, there's like a half fairy who she wants to be turned into a full fairy by Avatar, and she's like the daughter of like the president of the free states. And she's got giant knockers as well. And they're just chatting about like the situation and about using technology to protect themselves from Scorch. And then we get some like backstory, which again is more of these like still shots about how over like the thousands of years, Necron or Dark Wolf kept like trying to attack and kept getting beat back because the magic of these people is better. And like his corrupted like mutated scum that work for him are like they can't be organized. We get like a whole thing where like they're killing each other because there's like a disagreement. So it's like evil will like consume itself. So he has to find like a different way. And that different way is technology. So what he does is he sends his minions to search out and find like the pre-Holocaust technology and information, which is where we get the aforementioned swastika imagery. And like he says Sieg Heil at some point as well. Like, so they're able to like dig up this stuff. They're able to like reproduce like guns, and like it seems like they have like cloning vats, to be completely honest, because we get this whole shot after Necron. Okay, so we get that information, and so that they have guns, right? And then the good people are still just using magic, whose guns are corrupted, and that's what kind of drove people to war and the end of civilization in the first place, according to Avatar. And so they're chit-chatting, and Necron's like climbing up this tower where they're at, and then it hops up and it shoots the president, and then Avatar like kills it immediately with like magic, and then the fairy lady is like super sad, and she starts punching the corpse and stuff. And then the elf that was supposed to ward Avatar comes running in with his sword out, and he's like, "Oh, I failed you, Avatar. I've been unable." And then we switch back over to Scorch, and there's like a factory where it looks like they're building more of these Necrons, and so that 199 is like it's like a robot or something. Like I said, it kind of looks more like a cloning vat, but it could also be like it's like a factory. And then this like frog monster bounces over to the giant swastika with the throne in the middle where Black Wolf is, and he's like, "Oh, we've been successful. We killed the president." And the Black Wolf's like, "Yes, now is the time." And he goes, and there's like he opens like a curtain with a swastika, and he's like pronounces like, "Now is the time. We got to do this." And then we get another shot of like some random goons, and they're like, "Let's go. Dark Wolf's calling. We have to go." And the guy's like, "I don't want to go." And then the other guy's like, "Oh, Dark Wolf's found a way to make us invincible." And he's like, "Yeah, let's go." And then we see like a bunch of scenes, which I mean, he made like the Lord of the Rings cartoon as well. And if you've seen that, which is more people have seen that, it's a lot of that similar kind of like you get like a weird background, like a blue cloudy dark background, and then you get like these kind of like silhouettes that move around sometimes. So we see a lot of that. We see like the gathering armies of Scorch. So the movie like gets like more crazy as we continue forth. The Nazi imagery becomes very not just kind of like a throwaway thing to be like, look how bad they are. Like it's very specific in that. So all the Shadow Wolves, or yeah, Shadow Wolves, all the bad guys, people like they roll in and they're all standing around. He's like, "I'm going to show you something," and he casts a spell on this like device. He has a couple like fairies attached to it, and they start spinning it around, and it's just like Nazi propaganda essentially. It's like Hitler being like Zikale, and Germans marching around and tanks and all this stuff, and it's getting all the bad guys, like all the goblins and whatnot, they're getting like super hyped up. They're like, yeah, like bloodthirsty. And then we get like a map, and they're like invading outwards. And then we get like a little trench warfare situation with like some old elf and like some younger elves. And this one elf's like, "Aren't you worried about these guys invading?" And they're like, "Nah, last time they came through here like 10 years ago or whatever, we killed like 1.5 million of them. And so I'm not worried about these guys at all." And everyone's like, "Yeah, we got this." And so as the bad guys approach, the good guys all hop out with their weapons and they get ready. And then the thing that makes him invincible is like this reel, this film reel that he showed previously to like his soldiers. So he broadcast that somehow, magic, and the whole battlefield. So the elves like see it and they start freaking out, and they get like completely demoralized just because they're watching this like crazy propaganda stuff, I guess. And then it stuns them enough to where the enemy army can come and just like completely slaughter all of them. And then we get another little scene. There's some other stuff first, but we'll get to that because it like bounces around a little bit. So we get this other scene, and there's just like this guy guarding a home, and this kid asking why dad's doing that, and the mom's like, "Oh, we're to protect us." And then we see like a whole chain gang of like elves that have been captured, and these like gas mask looking characters. So there's like the goblins, there's like these frog monsters, there's these gas mask characters, they're like the bad guys. So these gas mask characters are they're like the comic relief of the bad guys. I guess they're kind of goofy. But they go to like a church, and they're like, "We don't know what to do with all these refugees, essentially, all these prisoners, because we don't have like food to feed them." And I'm like, you just slaughtered a whole bunch of them. Why do you care? It doesn't matter. So they go to like this church, and they're like, "Hey, can you take care of we want to leave these guys with you to take care of, because we don't want to deal with it." And these two like priests are just these like old crazy people, and they just do like, "Oh, let us pray," and they do like this crazy dance, and they're like slapping each other's booties with like boards, and like for a minute like one's on a crucifix, and then they're like flying with wings, and I guess they pray for like 5 hours, and then one of the guys like looks out the window, and like his boss is like, "What the fuck's going on up there?" And he's like, "They're still praying," and he's like, "I'm tired of this stuff. Just kill him." So then they killed him. Because religion's worthless? There's a lot of like kind of odd messaging in here. As in, this Raskin's clearly got like a lot of opinions on war and religion and such that he's expressing, but I don't know, it's kind of crazy. So then we finally get back to Avatar and Eleanor, who's the half fairy lady, and then I can't remember his name, but he's like the elf chieftain of this area. And they're ready. They're like, it's time to go get revenge for killing the guy and to go stop Shadow Wolf or Dark Wolf, whatever, something like that, his brother, from continuing to take over the lands. They're going to like head to Scourge and like take care of this problem like once and for all. So they get on their way, and Avatar has like rehabilitated Necrocom 1999 or whatever. So he's bringing him along, and the guy he's like, "I will help you. I do not want pain," and I am like, he's like kind of talking to him. So they get on the crazy like chocobo things, and they ride off, and they ride, and then they get to like the Mountain of Fairies, and the red guy, the Necrom guy, he's like, "Hey, these fairies are like very bad. We should go around the mountain. We should not go through it. And then Avatar's like, nah, we don't got time for that. They're just fairies. Fuck it. And then the elf chief's like, no, I hate fairies. And then Avatar's like, stop being so racist towards fairies. Fairies and elves have been racist towards each other for far too long. It's time for you guys to get along and be friends. And so they go into the mountain. They run into some fairies. They're like doing crazy stuff and being silly and causing some problems. And then Avatar's like had enough, so he summons like a storm, which is exciting. And then the Necrom guy like wanders off at that point, and he sees some bad guys, and he's like, "Ruh-roh, what's going on with that?" And then the elf guy finally the fairies like kind of settle down for a second. And there's like this elf guard guy, and he's like, "I'm sorry, these guys are so rambunctious. You know, we're not all like that. We're gonna take you to the king, and he'll kind of talk to you about whatever the fuck he wants to talk about." And Avatar's good, finally. And then that guard gets shot. Oh no! And then First of all, the elf guy's like wanders off. He's like, "Hey, where's Necrom?" And then the elf guy gets shot. And then the fairies grab Eleanor, and then Avatar like chases after her with the elf guy, and they end up in like some sort of like surreal like acid trip. And he gets attacked. The elf guy ends up alone, and he's like freaking out, and he gets attacked by like a giant bug monster, and he almost gets killed. But then he gets saved by Necrom 1999, who's the red guy with a rifle, and he got injured. So clearly he's a good guy, and he did join forces with Avatar and these guys because he saved the life of the elf, and then he kind of like passes out. He might be dead, and the elf runs up and like holds him and is like, no. So then we go to like the fairy king and like his tribunal. That's like they brought technology into the Elven Kingdom. That's like a big haram. And so they're going to like execute Eleanor or whatever. And then she starts using like elf magic or fairy magic that she didn't realize she had. And so she's like doing some crazy stuff. And it looks like she summons like this crazy monster thing. And she has like some control over it, but not like a lot of control over it. It's kind of odd. Anyway, then Avatar finally shows up, and he's like, "Hey, don't take her life, take my life. But just so you know, we lost like my elf friend and the other guy, but we're here to stop like Shadow Wolf from like destroying the world, and we don't need your help. We just need to be like left alone, and we'll just go do that. And we're sorry for like any problems we caused." And then and he's like, "I'm not here to fight you, and I'm not going to do anything. If you want to kill me, just do it." And then he gets shot in the arm with an arrow, and then he just like takes it. And then the Elf King's like, "Everyone shut the fuck up." And he's like, "The only honest thing I've heard all day is this guy, because he said he wasn't going to fight back, and he didn't. So you guys are free to go. We're not going to help you, but we're not going to hinder you. So good day." So they release Eleanor, and they destroy the monster, and then they send them to like this frozen tundra. And Avatar summons like a poncho for her, and he's like, "Sorry, it's not more warm." Avatar and Eleanor wander around the frozen landscape for a while. I don't think it's more than a day, but they wander around for a while, and then she gets all tuckered out, and she's like, "I need a break." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go look ahead." And he wanders up and sees that, dun, 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 they're just wandering around in circles, and he's like, "Fuck." Then he hears someone coming. He's like, "Oh shoot, it's assassins." So he goes and gets Eleanor up, and she pulls out her sword, and he gets ready to fight. And it's Elf Guy and the robot assassin, and hooray, they're saved. And so Avatar and Eleanor like pass out, and they get rescued. So then we get one of these kind of shots where we just get like a painting, and we get the lady who does like the narration, and she talks about how they took him to a cave and got him back to health, and they recovered, and they made plans, and they continued forth. And that's when they're in some woods, when they get ambushed by a bunch of like elves. At first it looked like goblins because one of the guys was green. And when I talk about elves in this show, you'll see if you're watching the video. If you're not watching the video, it's if you know anything about ElfQuest, that's what they look like. They don't look as good as like the ElfQuest elves from the comics, but they're more that elves and not like Dungeons & Dragons elves, like pretty beautiful elves, or Lord of the Rings elves. They're like ElfQuest elves, like Santa Claus elf creatures instead. So anyway, so then we meet like the new king of the elves, who has gathered forth all the disparate people who have survived like the various attacks, and he's brought them all together, and there's a lot of them, and he's like, Avatar, you're back. And so he takes them to like his like camp, and he tells everyone how great Avatar was, and how he's been around for thousands of years, and how he helped fight off the first horde, and like helped this guy's dad when he was there, and he's a legend. And he's gonna take everybody and go assault Black Wolf's castle, which is like just across like this river or this lake or this ocean thingy. But it's like it's right there, so we're so close. And so Avatar knocks him out, or doesn't knock him out. He punches him, and everyone pulls out their guns, and then the Avatar's party pulls out their weapons, and then the guy's like, "Everyone, put your fucking weapons down. That's fine. Avatar, he used to be a great man, and he was gonna help, but he did great things, so we're not gonna. He can just be on his fucking way. Like, get out of here." And then he goes to his tent, and then Avatar's kind of sad upon him. And I think it's the whole futility of war or something. That is what he's thinking. But it's very good that this guy does it. Anyway, so Avatar and crew, they keep going, and then they run into a tank, like a Panzer, the World War II German tanks. And the assassin guy like hops up on the tank. Oh, before that, when they're sitting around, the assassin guy looks kind of sad, and Eleanor goes up and like holds his hand, while Avatar and the elf are kind of talking about what they're going to do next. And all of a sudden, like a giant monster like appears in the sky, so Avatar has to go and like close it up. And he asks what happened. And Eleanor's like, well, I was trying to comfort the robot, and then the thing appeared. And he's like, oh, it's, you know, he's using all his will to like fend off Black Wolf's like powers. So when you touch his hand, it distracted him enough to summon that. Oh, that's interesting. That's good to know, because so when they're fighting the tank, the assassin guy hops up and he's gonna like kill the guy and take the tank, and then Eleanor throws a knife into his back and kills him, and then she hops in the tank and like they drive off, and then Avatar is like distraught because he's been betrayed by like his lover. So him and the elf join like the Elf King and his war machine as they sail like their like cool looking Norse boats across the water to the castle of Black Wolf. And when they get close, the elf's like, come on, Avatar, we're going to swim the rest of the way and go through the back door and pretend to be slaves. And we're going to work our way over to Black Wolf's castle. So they do that, but Avatar's like distracted. He's like completely shattered as like a man because like he was betrayed by like his lover. And he's so sad and doesn't understand. And the elf's like, come on, dude, we still got to do this shit. And then whatever. And Avatar, they bump into some like various folks, and he keeps like casting flowers on stuff. People are like, oh, he's so funny. And then we go into this guy who looks like kind of like a zombie Nazi who's like hitting on a prostitute. And then Avatar wanders out and he's like saying stuff to him, and they're like laughing. And then the toady, like the literal like frog monster that is, we've seen like a couple times, that Black Wolf's like right hand toady, comes along. He's like, that's Avatar, kill him. And then like the general guy's like, oh, there's no possible way. This guy's like a doddering old man, and ha ha ha, hilarious. And then the elf guy pops out. He's like, you're wrong, motherfucker, and kills him. And then some other guys show up and he kills them. He beats the shit out of them. Like he's just like jump kicking and throwing swords, and it's pretty rad. And then, but the little toady guy gets away and runs right to like the castle area. And so then elf like slaps Avatar, and he's like, get the fuck up and stop being retarded. We got a job to do. And Avatar's like, you're right. And then he becomes very resigned to like a suicide mission, essentially. He's like, I'm gonna go kill my brother and then die. And so they head into the castle and they're sneaking around, and at some point they find Black Wolf. And at this juncture, we get like in a very, very extended like war scene that goes on for like, I want to say 10 minutes. So the elves land and they get ready for battle, and then there's like a trumpet call, and all the monsters and mutants and whatever from the projector are all standing around, and then there's like another trumpet call, and they all charge each other, and we just get like some crazy 70s music and like an acid trip backgrounds, and like we just see like very shots of people standing around, or like the shadows and people getting stabbed or people getting shot, and it's like a massacre on both sides. And then, but it seems pretty even-handed. But then the projector magic, the illusion magic, comes into play, and then the elves get like awestruck by like what looks like like planes in the sky dropping bombs and stuff, and so then they start to like lose. We head back to the castle, and then Black Wolf's standing there like watching, and then Avatar and the elf like find him, and then Avatar is like, hey, go like bust open an entrance to this building. I'm gonna kill this guy, and we'll meet up later. And then he leaves, and Avatar is like, or not, I'm gonna die here with him. This is the end of my life, because he's so sad eponymous. So, but the elf guy is like looking around, and he runs into Eleanor, and he's like slaps the shit out of her, and he's about to like kill her. And then the queen, like Black Wolf's like wife with like the crazy son. Oh, I don't know if I brought this up. There's a there's a whole part where he goes and sees his like fairy lover, who's again like a boobacious. The only difference between her and Eleanor is that she's like blue. I don't think she's a fairy though. I think she's just like an elf, but like stacked. And she had a kid, and they're like, and he looks at the kid, and the kid's like not human or something. It's like still a mutant, and he's like, kill the baby and we'll try again later. And she's like, no, you can't keep killing my children, blah blah blah. And he's like, whatever, bitch. And so he heads out. So she's there with the baby, and Eleanor's like, she's like stops the elf from killing Eleanor, and Eleanor's like, when I touched the assassin, Black Wolf got into my mind and like took possession of me. So what I did, it was because I was possessed by Black Wolf. And that lady's like, yeah, that's true. He can do that. And he's like, well, you better get the fuck out of here. And then he grabs Eleanor. It's like, we gotta go find Avatar. So they head that way. And then Avatar stands up and he's like, brother. And then Black Wolf's like, good. You here to surrender and like join me and hand over the world? And Avatar and him kind of go back and forth. Like Avatar is being like a weirdo, and he's like, Mom taught me a lot of things, and I'm much more handsome than you, and yada yada. Black Wolf's, that's enough. It's time for you to die. And then Avatar is, well, I was gonna have a magic battle with you, but I found this gun, and he pulls it out and shoots him. Yep, that's it. He just shoots him like 2 or 3 times with a Luger, and then Black Wolf dies. And because he's dead, the projector stops working, and the whole castle starts to collapse. And Avatar is like, "Time to die." And then the elf and Eleanor show up, and the elf's like, "Look, I found Eleanor, and she was possessed by Black Wolf, and that's why she did what she did. She didn't actually betray you." And Avatar's like, "Oh, I still got that sweet fairy pussy. Let's go." And so they do. They escape, and then we get we get more narration. And it's like, with the death of the projector and Black Wolf, the castle collapses, and like all the like summoned evil spirits like disappear, and then some of the other people like they die as well. They get dragged back into hell, which I didn't know there were monsters from hell, but apparently there were. And then all the mutants who are like the actual people who live here are like, oh, get the fuck out. So they like peace out, and the ones who stick around to fight get massacred by the elves, and the elves like celebrate, and they return home, and everything's super peaceful, and it's like the end of like Black Wolf's like 10,000 year darkness in like the world. So everyone's super pumped about that shit. And then Eleanor, the elf, and Avatar are sitting around, and then if you recall, the fairy Eleanor, she's like the queen of whatever, Montenegro, and so they're about to head back. Oh, and then the elf catches the toady, and he's about to kill him, and then Avatar's like, leave him alone. Black Wolf's dead. There's nothing he can do. Like whatever. And the guy's like, thank you, and he just pieces out. And finally, as they're about to leave, Eleanor is like, hey, whatever your name is, elf guy, I'm declaring you king of Montenegro. Go and lead the people, and me and Avatar and I are going to go start a new kingdom somewhere else. And then he jokes about them getting married, and Avatar jokes back about being like, 10,000 years old, or having like another 1,000 years of life that Eleanor is not going to live. So I don't know about this marriage thing. I got a lot more life left. And she like giggles because they're going to go fuck. And the elf's like, well, good luck to you all. If I never see you again, thank you. And then he leaves. And then that's the end. So that's Wizards. So Wizards, did I like it? Yeah, I kind of did. There were times. It's very short. Well, short as in it's like a normal movie length as far as I'm concerned. It's like 120 minutes. And it moves very quick. It's like there's a lot of bizarre stuff. And it doesn't really... There's like with the narration stuff, you get some world building. And then there's like stuff that like you can kind of just watch and get the gist of what's going on. I feel like it could have easily been an hour. There's like some side stuff with like the gas mask guys with the Nazi team, with Black Wolf's team. Like they have like little like comedy sketches, or the whole thing with like the priests, the whole thing with the priests and prayer and stuff. It's like, I think he was getting at like religion's stupid, but it was just like long and unnecessary. And then, so like if you just look at like the core story, like Black Wolf, Avatar, their narration to like where they got to where they're at, some interactions with him and Eleanor, and then Black Wolf and his people to see like he's really like an evil guy, and then like a short journey with like the elves, and then the winter and the second thing, and then they get to the castle and take care of that. I mean, that's all you really need. Like there's a bunch of like superfluous stuff that is like completely unnecessary. And it's like there is like it's like one of those things where we're watching this, and you got to remember this is like in the 70s. Late 70s when this came out, and so it's like, yeah, this is definitely like anti-war kind of propaganda stuff, but it's not propaganda is not like government propaganda, but like this guy Raskin's had a lot of feelings about this, you can clearly tell, and relating these things, and like and then the shorthand was very obvious. Again, it's like, it's not just like, oh, these guys are Nazis and they're fascists. It's like, no, they're literal Nazis who like bring back like ancient technology to like recreate the Reich, and they call him the Fuhrer, and they sig Heil, and there's like swastikas all over the place, and you're like, it's very in your face. It's like a subtle allusion to like what's going on. It is like, hey motherfuckers, Nazis bad. Well, it's not even Nazis bad. It's like this is pretty, like there are people born after the war who are 30 years old-ish at this time. Which is always the case, but like born at like the end of the war who are going to be in like their 30s. So it's like, this is a lot of fresh memories. Like people who served in the war are going to be in like their 50s, 60s. So they're, out and about doing stuff. They're like still working, still in the workforce or running their farm or whatever. But I enjoyed it. It's very bizarre to say the least. So definitely it's not for everybody, but it's pretty quick. And again, I enjoyed it, and the characters are cute and funny, and like generally it's a pretty good time. So if you like trippy stuff and kind of fantasy or kind of a mix, I don't know. It's the thing is I like interesting novel things. So this is that I think that's really what it spoke to me because it's just like I don't think I've engaged in a lot of stuff, entertainment, material, escapism, whatnot, and I don't think I've ever seen something like this. Like I've seen things that are like okay, post-apocalyptic fantasy. Yeah, we got Shannara, got it, and there's other stuff too, but. And a lot of actually, to be honest, a lot of fantasy is rooted, especially Western fantasy, is rooted in this like post-apocalyptic kind of concept. Whether it's modern or like you look at like the Elder Scrolls series, there was like ancient Dwarven kingdoms that like are gone, and other ancient kingdoms. That's why you have crypts and all this other stuff. Like it's very ingrained in kind of like the D&D / Lord of the Rings inspired fantasy stuff that is like all over the place when it comes to Western fantasy, and that bleeds into a bit of like Japanese fantasy, which is what you see a lot with the anime these days. Because I mean, their conceptualization of this fantasy that's really rooted in like the JRPG stuff, particularly like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, comes from wizardry, which is like a Western property, and wizardry itself has like science fiction aspects and all that stuff. So it's you watch it, and if you're expecting like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or something like that, then you're gonna be like, what the fuck? But it's actually very true to like the era and like what was kind of like accepted fantasy tropes in like the late 70s, early 80s, because there's a lot of this stuff going on. So yeah, it's a recommend. And cool. So go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, and whatever. And I will catch you guys later. Bye.